Hello, what's going on people? Welcome back to my channel. Now today's video, I want to take a little bit of a detour into shared ownership. As you guys know, I am a shared ownership owner, if that is a phrase. So I've had this property for 5 years in May. I've been in this property for 5 years. And obviously there's been a lot of coverage in the media about the 95% mortgage scheme and 5% deposits, which is great news for kind of first-time buyers getting on that property ladder. But there's also been quite a few updates to the shared ownership scheme in 2021. So this video will be looking at that in a little bit more detail. If you haven't checked out my previous video on shared ownership, on my experience, a fairly positive one, which is quite rare in the shared ownership space, make sure you check that out. I'll link that in the description below and up here for you guys to view if you wish to do so. But yeah, let's get straight into the updates to the 2021 shared ownership scheme. Before we start, let me just explain briefly what shared ownership is. Shared ownership is a government scheme aimed to provide more affordable housing for first-time buyers. So instead of purchasing a whole property, you can purchase a portion of that, have a mortgage on that portion. That might be a share of 25%, and on the remaining 75%, you will pay rent to the housing association. So it just lowers the barrier of entry for a lot of first-time buyers who may not have the funds available to purchase a property outright. So the first update is quite a big one, to be honest. So the government have reduced the minimum initial share from 25% down to 10%. So originally, before this update, you could only purchase 25% of a property. Now you're able to purchase 10% of a property. And from that 10%, obviously you have a mortgage on. So let's say you have a property which is worth £400,000. You will have a 40 grand mortgage and pay 5% deposit towards that 40 grand mortgage, which I believe is £2,000. So a very, very kind of low barrier of entry for people with lower incomes and people who don't have a large amount of savings initially. So I think it will benefit a lot of people lowering this initial share from 25% down to 10%. The second update to the shared ownership scheme in 2021 is the introduction of gradual staircasing. So staircasing is basically where you increase your share in a property. So let's say I have a share of 25%, I can staircase to 35% or even more if I had the funds to do so, up until you eventually can buy the property outright and own 100% of the property. So in the previous scheme, you could only increase your share, so staircase, in 10% installments. And from my personal experience, this can be very, very expensive. It comes with a lot of additional fees, surveyor fees, admin fees, solicitor fees, and I ended up paying around £2,000 just to staircase from 35% up until 60%. So in this new update to this scheme, you'll be able to staircase from 1% installments, which I think is good news, as well as have heavily reduced fees. So you don't have to worry about admin fees, you don't have to worry about surveyor fees. They will actually take the valuation of the property from the local price index report, which is really positive. You don't have to send a surveyor out to the property and evaluate it, which obviously comes with those additional costs, but you will still have to pay solicitor fees to staircase. So I'm not too sure if this is a positive or a negative thing at the minute, because 1% increase in the property is not a lot, and it's still a lot of effort, especially with those solicitor fees. So I think it will be positive for some people, but other people, it won't have a big enough impact for them to actually staircase and pursue. Now, this third update, when I first read it, I thought this was a massive positive for people getting into shared ownership, because it's something that I've experienced a little bit of difficulty having purchased shared ownership property in the past. And that is an introduction of a 10-year period where the shared owner will actually receive support from the landlord on any essential repairs. And at face value, like I said, I thought it was great because I've had in the past where my boiler was actually broken. It wasn't producing any hot water, and I actually called the housing association expecting them to send someone round and fix it, and they basically said no. They said that's your responsibility, you fix it. And luckily I just went on YouTube and fixed it myself. YouTube's a great thing for that. Yeah, when I actually read what this actually means, it's not as positive as I first realised. So the actual repairs only include the external fabric of the building and any structural repairs, and not anything interior. So if your boiler breaks or if you've got a problem with the heating or the gas, water, that is all on the shared owner's responsibility and not the housing association. So be careful when you're reading into this. You may be liable for a lot more than you first realised. They do, however, have an opportunity to claim back up to £500 on any faulty instalments to gas, electric, any pipes, stuff like that. So that is positive, but like I said, not as good of news as I first realised when I seen this update. And lastly, the final update from this new shared ownership model comes from when you're actually selling your home. So something that I haven't actually experienced yet myself, but fingers crossed it will be an easy and straightforward process, but I guarantee it's not going to be. So when I eventually come around to selling this property, I will need to give the housing association an 8-week nomination period where they can market the property and sell my share of the property to their network. I won't be allowed to advertise the property on Rightmove or to the wider market. So I have a 60% share in this property. So it's very unlikely that another buyer will actually buy my share at 60%, because as we know, shared ownership is for kind of affordable option to buy property, and the kind of entry level into shared ownership is more around the 25 to 35% currently. So it'll be quite difficult to sell that. So after that 8-week period, I can then sell my property on the open market at 100%. So the whole property, and when we eventually, fingers crossed, find a buyer to buy the property, I will take my 60% and the 40% will go to the housing association. So quite a complicated process. With the new update, that nomination period will reduce from 8 weeks to 4 weeks, which gives the seller, the homeowner, more control and influence when selling their property, and they don't have to wait on the housing association to come back after 8 weeks to say they actually can't sell the property. You can now sell it on the open market. So overall, a positive update, I believe, giving the seller, the homeowner, greater power and more influence over the resale process when it comes to selling the shared ownership property. So those are the 4 big updates to the shared ownership scheme. I believe the scheme will be coming into play as of April 2021 up until 2026, so a 5-year period. However, this start date in April only applies to new build properties which apply for planning permission as of April 2021. So they can actually start the process of receiving that planning permission to build the property. And obviously it will take some time, months, maybe even years to actually build the property. So people will not actually benefit from these updates until either later in 2021 or early 2022. So that's something to bear in mind, but hopefully this has been useful if you're looking to get into shared ownership and start your journey into property and get on that property ladder as a first-time buyer. As I mentioned, I've done a previous video on shared ownership on my personal experience, so make sure you check that out if you need any more information. feel free to drop me a comment if you have any questions. And if you liked this video, if it's useful to you, make sure you subscribe for more content around property, shared ownership, which I'll be doing in the future. Thank you very much, guys. Like I said, I hope it's been useful, and I'll see you again next time.